He was 78 now, his frame stooped but still broad at the shoulders, like a tree that had weathered too many storms. His denim jacket was frayed at the cuffs. The Marine Corps patch on the sleeve faded to a ghost of its former red and gold. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. In his hand, he held a folded letter, its edges worn soft from years of handling. The paper was crisp once, official, stamped with the seal of the Department of Defense. Now it was a relic, like him. Amos had come to the square for the Veterans Day ceremony, a small affair Willow Creek held every year. He hadn't planned to stay long, just long enough to hear the names read, to feel the weight of memory settle in his chest. But when he reached the courthouse steps, a young man in a clipboard and a too-tight blazer stopped him. "Sorry, sir," the man said, barely glancing up. "This is a ticketed event. Family and invited guests only." Amos blinked, his pale blue eyes steady. "I'm a veteran," he said quietly, his voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. The man looked him over, taking in the worn jacket, the scuffed shoes, the hands that trembled just a little. "Name?" he asked, flipping through his list. "Amos Carver," he said. He didn't add gunnery sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired. He never did. The man shook his head. "Not here. You got ID?" Amos reached into his pocket, pulling out a leather wallet so old it creaked. He slid out his VA card, its corners curling, and handed it over. The man squinted at it, then handed it back. "Sorry, sir. No ticket, no entry. Rules are rules." Amos nodded, tucking the card away. He didn't argue. He never argued. He just turned and walked back to the edge of the square, where the crowd was thinner. He stood there, watching as families filed past, their voices bright with chatter. A child waved a tiny flag, oblivious to the man in the faded jacket. Amos's hand tightened on the letter in his pocket, and for a moment, his mind drifted back to a place of sand and heat, where the only sound was the panting of a dog at his side. His name was Rex, a German shepherd with eyes that saw more than most men. They'd served together in Iraq, 2004 to 2006, through dust storms and midnight raids. Rex had a nose for trouble, IEDs, ambushes, fear. He'd saved Amos's platoon more times than anyone could count, and Amos had saved him right back, carrying him through a firefight when a shard of shrapnel tore into his flank. They were a team, bound by something deeper than words. But when Amos's tour ended, the Corps sent Rex to another handler. The last Amos heard, Rex was slated for retirement and euthanasia. Policy, they'd said. No resources for non-working dogs. That was 2007. Amos had fought it, writing letters, making calls, begging anyone who'd listen to, let him take Rex home. But the answers were always the same. No record, no contact, no dog. He'd stopped asking by 2010, convinced Rex was gone. But the guilt never left, a stone in his chest that grew heavier with every passing year. He'd moved to Willow Creek after his wife, Clara, passed in 2015. It was her hometown, a place she'd loved for its quiet streets and starlit skies. Amos thought it might feel like home for him too, but it never quite did. He kept to himself, living in a small house at the edge of town, tending a garden he didn't much care for. His days were routine. Coffee at Millie's, a walk to the post office, evenings with a book or the radio. But every Veterans Day, he'd pull out that letter, a discharge notice for Rex, the only proof they'd ever been together, and wonder if he could have done more. The ceremony began with a bugle's call, thin and mournful. Amos stood straighter, his shoulders squaring out of habit. The mayor spoke, then a local pastor, their words floating over the crowd like leaves on a stream. Names were read, veterans living and gone. Amos waited, but his name wasn't called. Neither was Rex's. He hadn't expected it, but the omission stung all the same. As the crowd dispersed, Amos lingered, watching the flag ripple against the gray sky. He was about to turn away when a voice stopped him. "Excuse me, sir?" Amos turned to see a young woman, maybe 25, standing a few feet away. She wore a navy peacoat and a scarf the color of autumn leaves. Her eyes were bright, curious, and fixed on the patch on his sleeve. "Were you a Marine?" she asked. Amos nodded, cautious. "Yes, ma'am. Long time ago." She smiled, stepping closer. "My brother's in the Corps. Stationed at Pendleton. I saw your patch and, well, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. Amos felt a warmth in his chest, small but real. Appreciate that, he said. Your brother a grunt? She laughed. Yeah, infantry. Loves it, though I worry. She paused, tilting her head. You here for the ceremony? Tried to be, he said, glancing at the courthouse. Didn't make the list. Her brow furrowed. That's not right. You should have been up there. She hesitated, then held out her hand. I'm Ellie Monroe. Amos Carver, he said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, like she meant it. Ellie glanced at the letter in his hand, but didn't ask about it. Instead, she said, You got time for a coffee? My treat. I'd love to hear about your time in. Amos almost said no. He wasn't one for talking, especially about the past. But something in her eyes, genuine, not pitying, made him nod. All right, he said. Coffee sounds good. They crossed the square to Millie's, where the bell above the door jingled as they entered. The diner was warm, its air thick with the smell of bacon and syrup. They took a booth by the window, and Ellie ordered 2 coffees, black. Amos sat across from her, the letter now tucked in his jacket. He wasn't sure why he'd agreed to this, but he felt a pull, like a tide he couldn't fight. So, Ellie said, stirring sugar into her cup, what was it like, being a Marine? Amos took a sip of his coffee, letting the heat ground him. Hard, he said finally, but good mostly. You learn who you are out there, who you can count on. Ellie nodded, listening like his words mattered. You serve in Iraq, Afghanistan? Both, he said. Iraq mostly, 2 tours. Gunnery sergeant by the end. Her eyes widened slightly. That's no small thing. You see a lot of action? Enough, he said, his voice tightening. He didn't talk about the firefights, the friends lost, the nights when sleep never came. But he thought of Rex, and something softened in his chest. Had a good partner, though, kept me sane. Oh? Ellie leaned forward. Another Marine? Amos shook his head. Dog. German Shepherd. Name was Rex. Ellie's smile grew. A working dog? That's amazing. What was he like? Amos paused, the memories rushing back like a flood. Smart, he said. Braver than me most days. He'd sit by me at night, just watching, like he knew I needed him there. He looked down at his coffee, his voice quieter. Lost track of him after my tour. They said he was put down. Been trying to find out for years, but he trailed off, shaking his head. Ellie's expression shifted, a mix of sympathy and determination. You never found him? No, Amos said. Wrote letters, called, nothing. Just this. He tapped his jacket where the letter rested. Proof he existed. Ellie was quiet for a moment, then said, That's not right. You should know what happened to him. He was your partner. Amos shrugged, but her words stirred something in him. He hadn't talked about Rex in years, not like this. Claire had listened back when she was alive, but even she couldn't ease the ache. Ellie, though, she didn't look away, didn't change the subject. She just sat there, waiting. Tell me about him, she said. What made him special? And so Amos did. He told her about Rex's bark, sharp and commanding, how he'd nudge Amos's hand when he sensed trouble. He told her about the time Rex found an IED buried under a dirt road, saving a convoy of 20 men. He told her about the nights in the desert, when the stars were so bright they hurt to look at, and Rex would lie beside him, his warmth a tether to the world. The words came slow at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. Ellie listened, her coffee growing cold, her eyes never leaving his. When he finished, the diner was quieter, the lunch rush fading. Amos felt lighter, like he'd set down a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. Ellie reached across the table, touching his arm lightly. Amos, she said, Rex sounds like family. You don't give up on family. He met her gaze, surprised by the steel in her voice. Ain't much to do now, he said. Been too long. Ellie shook her head. Maybe, but maybe not. My uncle's a vet, not a veteran, a veterinarian. Works with service dogs sometimes. He might know someone who can help. Amos's heart stuttered, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. He wanted to believe her, but he'd been down this road before, letters unanswered, calls ignored. Still, he nodded. Worth a shot, he said. Ellie pulled out her phone, typing quickly. I'll text him now. What was Rex's ID number? Anything official? Amos hesitated, then pulled the letter from his jacket. He unfolded it carefully, smoothing it on the table. The paper listed Rex's service number, his breed, his last known assignment. Ellie snapped a photo, her fingers flying over the screen. Sent, she said, looking up. He's good at digging. If there's anything to find, he'll find it. Amos didn't know what to say. Thank you, he managed, his voice thick. Ellie smiled, but there was tinged with something serious. No one should lose their partner, Amos. Not like that. They finished their coffee, and Ellie insisted on paying. As they stepped back into the yard, the air had warmed, the sun breaking through the clouds. Amos felt different, like something had shifted. He didn't know if Ellie's uncle would find anything, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Ellie walked with him to the edge of the square, where the flag still flew. I'll call you, she said, soon as I hear anything. Amos nodded, tipping his hat. Appreciate you, Ellie, she grinned. Semper Fi, right? He chuckled, a rare sound. Semper Fi. As she walked away, Amos stood there, watching the flag snap in the breeze. The letter in his pocket felt lighter now, less like a stone. He thought of Rex, those brown eyes, and whispered, Hold on, boy. I'm still looking. The days after Amos Carver's coffee with Ellie Monroe passed like a slow current, each one blending into the next. Willow Creek settled back into its rhythm, leaves falling, streetlights flickering on at dusk, the hum of life undisturbed. Amos kept to his routine. Coffee at Millie's, a walk to the post office, evenings with the radio tuned to old country songs. But something had shifted inside him, a faint spark he hadn't felt in years. He caught himself glancing at his phone, an old flip model he rarely used, half expecting it to ring with news from Ellie's uncle. It didn't, not yet, but the waiting felt different this time. It wasn't the dead-end silence he'd known for so long. It was hope, fragile but stubborn. Amos sat on his porch one crisp November evening, a wool blanket over his knees. The air smelled of pine and frost, and the stars above were sharp as pinpricks. In his hand was the letter about Rex, its creases soft from years of handling. He didn't read it anymore. He didn't need to. The words were etched in his memory. Canine Service Number K472. German Shepherd. Status, retired. The last line always stung. Disposition, pending. He'd always taken it to mean Rex was gone, put down like so many working dogs when their service ended. But Ellie's words echoed in his mind. You don't give up on family. For the first time, he wondered if he'd misread that word, pending. His thoughts drifted to Iraq, to a night in 2005 when the world was fire and chaos. His platoon had been ambushed outside Fallujah, pinned down by sniper fire. Amos had been crouched behind a crumbling wall, his heart hammering, when Rex growled low, ears pinned back. Before Amos could react, Rex bolted, zigzagging through the dust toward a shadowed alley. A moment later, an explosion rocked the street, an IED, triggered by Rex's movement. The blast threw Amos to the ground, but when the smoke cleared, Rex was there, limping but alive, his eyes locked on Amos as if to say, Get up! We're not done! That night, Rex saved 12 men. Amos had carried him back to base, blood soaking his uniform, promising he'd never let him go. The memory faded as headlights swept across his yard. A car pulled up, its engine idling softly. Amos squinted, recognizing Ellie's blue hatchback. She stepped out, a scarf bundled around her neck, her breath visible in the cold. Evening, Amos, she called, climbing the porch steps. Hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, he said, folding the letter away. Didn't expect you. Ellie sat in the chair beside him, her eyes bright with something like excitement. I heard from my uncle. He's got a lead on Rex. Amos's heart stuttered. He leaned forward, the blanket slipping to the floor. What kind of lead? Ellie pulled out her phone, scrolling to a message. Uncle Dan works with a group that rehomes military dogs. He checked Rex's service number against their records. Turns out, Rex wasn't put down. He was retired in 2008 and adopted out. Amos stared at her, the words not quite sinking in. Adopted? He's alive? Ellie nodded, her smile cautious but warm. Looks like it. He went to a family in Montana. A ranch, actually. Dan's got a contact there who's tracking down the details. It's not a sure thing yet, but it's more than we had before. Amos's hands trembled, not from the cold. He looked out at the dark yard, his throat tight. Montana, he murmured. That's a long way. Yeah, Ellie said. But if he's there, we'll find him. Dan's reaching out to the family. He thinks they might be open to talking. Amos nodded slowly, his mind racing. Rex. Alive. After all these years. He pictured those brown eyes, that steady gaze. Why didn't they tell me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I wrote. I called? Ellie's expression softened. I don't know, Amos. The system's messy. Records get lost. People move on. But you didn't give up. That's what matters. He met her gaze, seeing the same determination he'd noticed at Millie's. You didn't have to do this, he said. Why are you helping me? Ellie shrugged, looking at the stars. My brother's out there, serving. I think about him coming home one day, maybe feeling like the world's forgotten him. If I can help one Marine find his partner, maybe it's a start. She paused, then added, Plus, Rex sounds like one hell of a dog. Amos chuckled, a rough sound. He was. They sat in silence for a moment, the night wrapping around them. Ellie stood, brushing off her coat. I'll let you know when Dan hears back. Might take a few days, but we're close, Amos. I can feel it. He rose, slower, his knees protesting. Thank you, Ellie. Means more than I can say. She grinned. Semper Fi, right? Semper Fi, he echoed, watching as she drove away. The next week was a blur of waiting. Amos kept busy, splitting wood for his fireplace, fixing a loose board on the porch. But his thoughts were in Montana, on a ranch he'd never seen, with a dog he hadn't dared hope was alive. He dug through an old trunk in his attic, finding a faded photo of Rex taken in Iraq. The dog sat at attention, ears perked, a dusty Humvee in the background. Amos traced the image with his thumb, remembering the weight of Rex's head on his knee. On a gray Tuesday morning, his phone rang. Amos fumbled to answer, his heart pounding. Hello? Amos, it's Ellie. Her voice was bright, urgent. We found him. Rex is alive. Amos sank into a chair, gripping the phone. You sure? Positive, she said. The family's name is Harper. They've had him since 2008. He's old now, but healthy. They love him, Amos. And they're willing to meet you. He closed his eyes, a wave of relief crashing over him. Where? Outside Bozeman. It's about a 15-hour drive. Dan's got their address and number. They're expecting your call. Amos's mind spun. A drive like that wasn't easy, not at his age, not with his truck's rattling engine. But he didn't hesitate. I'll go, he said, soon as I can. Ellie laughed, a sound like sunlight. I knew you would. I'm coming with you if you're okay with it. My car's better for long trips, and I could use a break from Willow Creek. Amos opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. He didn't want to do this alone, not really. All right, he said. We'll split the gas. Deal, Ellie said. I'll swing by tomorrow to plan. Get some rest, Amos. You're going to see your partner again. He hung up, the silence of his house louder now. He pulled out the photo of Rex, his hands steady for the first time in days. I'm coming, boy, he whispered. The next morning, Ellie arrived with a thermos of coffee and a road map. They sat at Amos's kitchen table, plotting the route. Bozeman was a straight shot through Idaho, mostly highway. Ellie suggested stopping halfway to rest. Amos packed light, a duffel with clothes, the letter, the photo, and his old Marine Corps cap, its eagle, globe, and anchor, tarnished but proud. They left at dawn the following day, Ellie's car humming along the interstate. The landscape unfolded in waves of gold and green, mountains looming in the distance. Amos was quiet, watching the road, his thoughts on Rex. Ellie filled the silence with stories, her brother's boot camp letters, her job at the library, her dream of seeing the Pacific. Amos listened, grateful for her voice, for the way it kept the past at bay. They stopped for the night in Pocatello, a small motel with flickering neon. Amos barely slept, his dreams a jumble of desert and barking. By morning, they were back on the road, the air growing colder as they climbed into Montana. Ellie's phone buzzed with a text from Dan, confirming the Harpers were ready. Amos's stomach tightened, nerves he hadn't felt since his last patrol. They reached the Harper Ranch just after noon. It was a sprawl of open land framed by snow-dusted peaks. A wooden sign at the gate read, Harper Family Ranch, established 1946. A woman in her 50s, her hair streaked with gray, met them at the driveway. She introduced herself as Linda Harper, her handshake warm. "You must be Amos," she said, her eyes kind. "We've been waiting for you." Amos nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you, ma'am, for taking care of him." Linda smiled. "Rex's family. Come on, he's in the barn." They followed her across the yard, Ellie's hand brushing Amos's arm in quiet support. The barn was warm, smelling of hay and leather. In a corner, on a pile of blankets, lay a German shepherd, his fur silvered with age. His ears twitched at the sound of footsteps, and he lifted his head, eyes bright despite the years. Amos froze, his breath catching. It was him. Rex. Older, slower, but unmistakable. Those eyes, steady, knowing, locked onto Amos, and a low whine rose from the dog's throat. "Rex," Amos said, his voice breaking. He knelt, ignoring the ache in his knees, and held out his hand. Rex struggled to his feet, tail wagging slowly, and limped forward. He pressed his nose into Amos's palm, whining louder, his body trembling with recognition. Amos's vision blurred, tears spilling down his cheeks. He hadn't cried since Clara's funeral, but these were different. Tears of joy, of relief. He wrapped his arms around Rex, feeling the dog's warmth, the steady beat of his heart. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered. "I'm so sorry it took so long." Rex licked his face, a gesture so familiar it broke Amos open. He laughed through his tears, stroking Rex's fur, oblivious to the world around him. Ellie stood back, her eyes wet, while Linda watched with a quiet smile. "He knew you," Linda said softly, "soon as you spoke." Amos looked up, still holding Rex. "How'd you get him?" Linda sat on a hay bale, her hands clasped. "My husband was a handler in the army. When he retired, we wanted to give a military dog a home. Rex came to us through a program in 2008. They said his first handler was gone, no family to claim him. We didn't know you were out there, Amos. I'm sorry." Amos shook his head. "Don't be. You gave him a good life. That's enough." They spent the afternoon in the barn, Amos sitting with Rex, Ellie and Linda sharing stories. The Harpers had treated Rex like royalty. Wide fields to roam, a warm bed, kids to play with until he slowed down. Amos showed them the photo, the letter, telling them about Iraq, about the dog who'd saved him. Linda brought out a box of Rex's things, a worn collar, a commendation from the Corps. Amos held the collar, its leather cracked, and felt a piece of himself come back. As the sun dipped low, Linda invited them to stay for dinner. Over pot roast and warm rolls, the Harpers asked Amos to visit again. "Rex is yours too," Linda said. "Anytime you want to see him, you're welcome." Amos nodded, his heart full. "I'd like that." They left at dusk. Rex asleep in the barn, too old for long goodbyes. Amos felt lighter, like he'd left the stone in his chest behind. Ellie drove, the road dark and quiet. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than I've been in years," Amos said, the photo of Rex in his pocket. "Thank you, Ellie, for everything." She smiled. "Just doing what Marines do, looking out for each other." Back in Willow Creek, word of Amos's reunion spread. At Millie's, folks clapped him on the shoulder, asked about Rex. The town council voted to add a plaque to the courthouse square, honoring Rex and Amos. It read, "For those who serve and those who wait." Amos saw it one morning, his coffee in hand, and felt a quiet pride. He wrote to the Harpers regularly, planning another trip. He started speaking at the local VFW, telling Rex's story, urging others to honor the dogs still serving. Ellie joined him sometimes, her brother's letters, now including a note for Gunny Carver. Amos kept the photo of Rex on his mantle beside Clara's, a reminder that some bonds never break. They finished their coffee, and Ellie insisted on paying. As they stepped back into the yard, the air had warmed, the sun breaking through the clouds. Amos felt different, like something had shifted. He didn't know if Ellie's uncle would find anything, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Ellie walked with him to the edge of the square, where the flag still flew. "I'll call you," she said, "soon as I hear anything." Amos nodded, tipping his hat. "Appreciate you, Ellie?" She grinned. "Semper Fi, right?" He chuckled, a rare sound. Semper Fi.